In a dramatic political move, former President Donald Trump has released billions of dollars in education funding that had been previously withheld, citing concerns over what he called the radical left-wing indoctrination in America's public schools. The funds, which were frozen during his last term and into the transition period, have now been approved for distribution, following new conditions aimed at reshaping the direction of public education policy nationwide. The background, culture, war in classrooms. During his presidency, Trump frequently clashed with educators, teachers' unions, and Democratic leaders over curriculum content, particularly regarding race, gender identity, and American history. His administration notably opposed teachings on systemic racism and programs inspired by critical race theory, CRT, claiming that such frameworks promote division and anti-American sentiment. In 2020 and 2021, Trump's administration introduced the 1776 Commission, a counter to the New York Times 1619 Project, which emphasized the legacy of slavery in shaping U.S. history. The withholding of federal education funds was part of a broader effort to pressure schools to adopt what Trump described as patriotic education. According to the Trump team, federal education grants and funds were placed on hold for schools and districts that promoted materials or trainings based on what they labeled radical ideology. The recent release, a political recalibration with Trump actively campaigning for the 2024 election and maintaining considerable influence in GOP circles. The recent decision to unfreeze the funds is being interpreted by many as both a strategic pivot and a renewed attempt to assert control over the education narrative. In a statement released by his spokesperson, Trump said, "The time has come to restore proper education in our schools, education that celebrates America, respects parents, and stops pushing radical leftist lies on our children. By releasing these funds, we are giving states a chance to do the right thing." However, the release of the funds comes with strings attached. Reports indicate that receiving districts must adhere to guidelines that prioritize the removal of curriculum perceived as politically biased, reinforcement of traditional American values, restrictions on gender identity discussions before high school level, transparency, initiatives requiring schools to share teaching materials with parents. Critics argue that these guidelines are a thinly veiled attempt to suppress inclusive education and silence historically marginalized voices. Reactions, applause, and outrage. Supporters of Trump's move, especially conservative education activists and Republican-led state governments, welcomed the release of funds. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who has pushed similar education reforms in his state, praised the announcement as a victory for parents and students. Organizations like Mums for Liberty and other parental rights groups see this as a win for the movement to remove what they call woke ideology from schools. They argue that parents should have more control over their children's education and that federal funding should support values aligned with American heritage and constitutional principles. On the opposing side, educators and civil rights groups expressed concern over the politicization of education funding. Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, stated, "This is yet another example of using our children's education as a political pawn. Our students need critical thinking, not censorship. They deserve to learn the full history of our nation, including the hard truths." Progressive lawmakers have also sounded alarms. Senator Elizabeth Warren called the release manipulative and dangerous, accusing Trump of conditioning essential school resources on ideological compliance. Impact on schools and students. The sudden availability of billions in federal funding will undoubtedly have a significant impact, especially for underfunded districts still grappling with post-COVID learning loss, staffing shortages, and outdated infrastructure. However, how much of that money is actually used and under what terms will vary by state and district. Some school boards have already announced plans to apply for the funds, while others remain hesitant due to the political strings attached. Legal experts predict a wave of lawsuits challenging the constitutionality of federally mandated curriculum standards tied to funding. Looking ahead, 2024 and beyond as the 2024 presidential election looms, Education is shaping up to be a central battleground. Trump's decision to release the withheld funds appears to be an attempt to reclaim the education agenda, energize his base, and position himself as a defender of traditional American values, with national debates raging over what students should be taught, who gets to decide, and how federal resources are allocated. This development adds a volatile new chapter to America's ongoing education culture war. Whether this move ultimately benefits students or further polarizes communities remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: the classroom is now a front line in the political fight for America's future.